Now, I know it can be tempting to just eyeball design when it comes to layouts. And yes, ultimately, your eyes will be making the end decision. But there's a whole suite of features in InDesign that can help you to use gridding and other systems to create far better starting points and consistency in your layouts. In this lesson, I'll show you how to create a hidden framework that you can use in our brochure. So before I show you how, I'll briefly explain why. And if you open up the finished example of the Skillshare brochure and just hit the W key to bring up this full view, you'll notice that not everything. In some cases, an element will spill over the grid lines or won't stick completely to it. But in most cases, as you look through what I've designed here, the various elements are conforming to this grid. And there'll be cases where perhaps there's a choice. This is a good example where these are just slightly below. You can see when I've initially designed this, both these boxes were lining up nicely with this grid. But likely, when I've looked at centering them on the page, they've needed to be nudged up slightly. So sometimes the grid will give you a starting point, and then when you come through to fine tune later, you can always break this slightly, but it does give you a very strong starting point. Another example here, perhaps this paragraph could have conformed strictly to that grid in the background, but I may not have liked the way the text and the lines were breaking. So perhaps I've just expanded that slightly. Here's another example. So the way this has been balanced, it's all drawing on the grid and this magenta line, which is the page margin. Certainly the case with this page, and so on. So you can see I've not rigidly stuck to it, but I have used the grid to put this design together. I'm going to show you both how to set up a grid to begin with, and then how to use it effectively. So I'm coming back to our starting point template document. If you wish, you could create a new file, and I'll briefly show you the settings I'd recommend using. So we want a A4 page. If you go to the presets, you've got A4 set up there for you. By default, it has no bleed. I would add a 3mm bleed, which is a little space. You can see it in red here, just off the edge of the document, and it means any imagery, background colors that need to be trimmed. There's a little bit of forgiveness there for the printer. If they were to trim slightly inside or outside when they're cutting the page, it gives them a little bit of margin for error. So that's the bleed. For this example, I think I've set fairly large margins, possibly even 30mm. And then the columns, well, I'll set that up later when I show you how to alter a master page. So if you were to use this as a starting point, that would give you the same exact page that I'm going to show you how to format and set up in our example here. So I want you to open the Pages panel, and you'll see at the very top of this Pages panel, there's a section, and it will list, in this case there's just one. Sometimes you can have several master pages, and this is called the A master. The next would be called B, and so on. And as you look through the Pages panel, you can see the little A in the corner of these preview thumbnails. And as you hover over it, the tooltip says A master applied. So this is essentially setting up the formatting for all of the pages we've created here. And if I were to come to the bottom and just create a blank new page, by default it has that A master applied. I'll undo that. So let's open our master page by double clicking it. And to set these margins and guidelines, you'll want to make sure you've got both sides of the spread selected. So just shift click on the right so that you can see both are selected in blue. And then we want to come up to layout and margins and columns. So you may have already set that 30mm margin when you created a new document, or if you're using this template, you've already got that in place. The number of columns, well, you can see in magenta, I've got 2 columns here, and I find that sometimes helps me visually. I can see very easily where the center of a page is. And essentially on a spread, just from these magenta margin outlines, I've got 4 columns that I can use. So I'd recommend keeping that or putting that in place. Next, you want to go back up to layout again and create guides. And if you click on this little tab, remove existing ruler guides, if you click that button, this is what the page or the spread would look like without those guides in place. Now, perhaps if you're not familiar with InDesign, that looks a little cleaner, maybe a little less overwhelming, but you'd be missing out, because as I click here to add rows, and first we'll just need to match the 3mm gutter that I'd set for the document. As we add rows, you can see it further breaks down the page. It's conforming to our margins, so those line up nicely. And as I add some columns as well, you can see now we've got a grid we could use to really fine-tune and position our content within the document. So everyone actually has different opinions on this. Personally, for my layouts, I like to use something that's divisible by 4. So I'm going to go for 8 rows, and I'll just go for 4 columns, and that's of course per page. Click OK. And now when we visit any other page in the document, so just double click to jump back, you'll see that those grids, as long as we have the normal view toggled, those grids are in place. So in this example here, let's say I wanted to line this text up nicely. Well, I've got this handy grid that I can use to position it. Because I've got content at the top here, I don't quite want to center it. I'll show you what that would look like there. That would feel just a little top heavy on the page. So jumping to the nearest grid point, or perhaps thinking, well, this takes up just over almost exactly 1 box in this grid. So I'll jump 1 box down from the center. You can rationalize it different ways, but just having these grids in place is a really helpful guide to help you lay your content out. And invariably, if you're trying to attach something to make it conform to this grid, when you step back and look at it, it just feels that bit better balanced. Now, this said, if I jump across to our final brochure again, if a grid was always right, well, we'd be unemployed as designers. We wouldn't be needed. Ultimately, humans look at content with their eyes, and so if something looks unbalanced to your eyes, well, you have to trust that first. But using the grid is a really good starting point. So hopefully you've got your grid in place now, or perhaps you've used the one that I had built in to this starting point document. So there are actually a few tips that will just help you get the most from this. First of all, snapping options. So if you go to View, Grids and Guides, and you can see a number of options here, all of which I have selected, to snap to guides and to use smart guides. So smart guides means if you drag an item of your content, you can see little magenta lines pop up where it thinks it would be helpful. So that magenta line means this object is now directly centered on the page. If I move it up, you get another magenta line, so it's centered vertically. And if I pop it there, it's centered both vertically and horizontally. So that's a smart guide. I find that quite useful. Snapping to grids means this just pops a little easier to align to the nearest grid point. It doesn't have to. I could drop it just there, but you'll find as you're moving and dragging things with your cursor, it wants to help you. It tries to land the content to the nearest grid mark. So that's helpful. That can save time. You may also find on a particular page, I'll jump back to this document here, you may find you need an additional guide that doesn't exist in your grid. And here's an example here because I've gone for text that's really dynamic, it's pushing to the edges of the page, I wanted a new ruler to line that up with this element I have at the bottom here. So to add a new guide, making sure your ruler is enabled. If it's not, you can hit Control R or Command R and just drag from that ruler, drag inwards from the edge, and wherever you release, it's going to place a guide for you. So it's as simple as that, and dragging out from the ruler, you can add as many custom guides as you want. Just note that will be specific to each page. So if I've dragged those there onto this page, when I come to my next page, it goes back to the layout we've selected in our master copy on our master page here. So it's a lot to grasp, I know, but it really does help you to better organize your content and to give clients that professional result that they're looking for. Lastly, and this is an important part of a framework, layers. And if you click open the layers panel, you'll see I've organized the content into layers. I've named 4 of them: a background layer, an images layer, an objects layer, and a text layer. So this vivid blue you can see is applied to these text elements. You've got a red outline here for an object. So we've got an object there which is sitting behind our text but above the underlying image, which is on a green layer. Technically that could sit on the background layer because it's a background image, but you'll see a scenario here on this page where I've used the background layer to apply this off-white behind my text, and potentially that could sit behind an image as well. So I hope those layout tools are helpful, and with all these things in place and some understanding of how they work, we're now really ready to get stuck in, and we'll do that beginning with the front cover of our brochure.